Nothing about that Wednesday felt like the day my whole family would show its true face. That's what I keep coming back to, even now. Nothing felt wrong, until it did. My name is Frank Del Vecchio. I'm 68 years old, 34 years running a small machine shop off Route 9 outside Pittsfield, Massachusetts, before I sold it and retired with enough to be comfortable, not enough to be careless. I've lived in the same white farmhouse on Wacona Falls Road for going on 40 years. I drive a 2019 Ford F-150 that still runs, like it owes me nothing. No enemies, no feuds, no unfinished business with the world that I knew of. I am, by any honest measure, a simple man who built a simple life out of steel and sweat and stubbornness. And on the second Wednesday of March, my son called and asked if I'd come stay with him and his family for a week while they got the guest room set up nice for me. Just a visit, he said. Just some time together. That's it. That's all it was supposed to be. Danny called on a Sunday night. I was in my recliner watching the Bruins lose again, half asleep, when my phone lit up. Dad. His voice had that particular warmth he only used when he wanted something, though I didn't let myself think that at the time. How's the knee? Knee's fine, Danny. What's going on? Nothing. Nothing. Marie and I were talking, and, well, we feel bad. You're out there alone, in that big house, and we're 40 minutes away, and we barely see you. We want you to come stay with us for a bit. A week, 2 weeks, however long you want. Get to know your grandkids again before they're grown and gone. Now, understand something about me and my son. Danny is 39 years old, married to a woman named Marie for 11 years, and they have 2 kids, Sophie and Cole, 12 and 9. Danny works, or worked, I should say, though I didn't know that yet, as a regional sales manager for a company that sold industrial flooring coatings. He was never a bad kid, never in real trouble growing up, but he had a way of wanting things faster than he could earn them. And after his mother passed 4 years ago, I started noticing he called me more when the bills were due than when they weren't. Still, a father wants to believe his son is calling because he misses him. I don't know, Danny. I've got the dog to think about. Bring Tucker. The kids would love it. Marie's already talking about making up the guest room special for you. She wants to paint it, get you a real bed, not that pull-out thing. There it was again, that detail. The bed, the paint, something about a woman I hadn't spoken to in weeks, suddenly caring about the exact thread count of my comfort. I should have heard it as a warning bell. Instead, I heard it as love, because that's what a father wants to hear. And there is no fool on this earth easier to fool than a lonely one. 1:30. What time should I come? Come Friday. Stay as long as you want. Honestly, Dad, stay as long as you need. As long as you need. I remember turning that phrase over in my head after I hung up and thinking it was a strange thing to say to a man who didn't need anything. I want to be straight with you, the way I've learned to be since all of this happened. So pull up a chair, because this one's going to take a while to tell right. I packed a duffel bag Thursday night. Tucker, my old yellow lab, sat on the bed watching me fold shirts like he already knew something I didn't. Dogs are like that. They read a room the way people used to before screens ate everyone's attention. Danny and Marie live in a raised ranch out in Dalton. Nice enough street, decent enough yard. The kind of house that says, "We're doing fine," without quite convincing you. They mean it. When I pulled the truck into the driveway Friday afternoon, Marie came out onto the porch, wearing an apron, flour on her hands, looking for all the world like a woman in a magazine ad for family togetherness. Frank, she hugged me tighter and longer than she ever had before. We are so glad you're here. The kids ran out. Sophie hugged my leg. Cole showed me a rock he'd found that he swore was a fossil. Tucker bounded across the yard like he'd been let out of prison. It was, in every visible way, a warm homecoming. The guest room really had been redone. Fresh paint, pale blue, a real queen bed with a quilt Marie said her grandmother made, though I'd find out later that wasn't true either. There was a little side table with a lamp, and on that table sat a weekly pill organizer, the kind with the days of the week printed across 7 little compartments, already sitting there waiting for me. I know you take your blood pressure pills and the cholesterol ones, Marie said when she caught me looking at it. I figured since you're staying a while, it'd be easier if I just kept them organized for you. One less thing to think about. I told her that was thoughtful. And it was thoughtful, or it looked thoughtful, which in my experience turned out to be a very different animal. Dinner that first night was pot roast, and it was good. And Danny opened a bottle of wine he said he'd been saving, and for about 2 hours I let myself believe I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Sophie asked me to tell the story about the time I welded my own belt buckle shut by accident, which I'd told 100 times and would tell 100 more. Cole fell asleep against my arm on the couch during a movie none of us were really watching. Marie kept refilling my wine glass before I'd finished the one I had. I went to bed that night feeling, if I'm being completely honest, grateful. Grateful and a little embarrassed that I'd ever doubted my own son's love, even for a second. That gratitude lasted exactly 4 days. It was small things at first, the kind of small things you explain away because the alternative explanation is too ugly to hold in your hands. Monday morning I woke up groggy, thick-headed, like I'd been on a 3-day bender, though I'd had 1 glass of wine the night before. I mentioned it to Marie over coffee. "Oh, that's probably just adjusting to the new bed," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Some people sleep too well the first few nights somewhere new. Your body's not used to actually resting." That sounded reasonable enough. I let it go. Tuesday I woke up feeling the same way, worse if anything. My mouth dry as chalk, my thoughts moving through molasses. And that morning I noticed something on the kitchen counter that stopped me cold, for reasons I couldn't quite name yet. A small amber prescription bottle, no label that I could see from where I stood, tucked behind the coffee maker, like somebody had set it down in a hurry and forgotten it, or hadn't wanted it found. I didn't touch it that day. I want to be honest about that. I told myself it was probably Marie's, or one of the kids' allergy medicine. And I went about my morning, and I felt foolish for even noticing it, the way you feel foolish for jumping at a shadow. But Wednesday morning, the bottle was still there. And Wednesday morning, I felt worse than either of the 2 days before. That's when the second thing happened. I was in the bathroom off the guest room, and through the wall, that house has thin walls. The kind builders throw up fast and cheap and call cozy. I heard Danny and Marie talking low in their bedroom. I wasn't trying to listen. I want that on the record. But when you hear your own name in a whisper, something in a father's chest just stops. "He's not going to sign anything if he's sharp," Marie was saying. "You know that. We need him foggy enough to go along with it, not so foggy the lawyer notices." "I'm not comfortable with this, Marie. You're not comfortable with losing the house either. You want to explain to Sophie and Cole why we're moving into an apartment. This is the only way, Danny. Your father has $400,000 sitting in accounts doing nothing. We need 8 months. 8 months, and the flooring company debt is paid off, and nobody ever has to know." I stood in that bathroom with the water running so they wouldn't hear me not moving, and I felt something in my chest I can only describe as the floor of my whole life quietly giving way beneath me, board by board, without a single sound. I didn't say anything that day. I want you to understand why, because people who haven't lived it always ask why. I didn't just confront them right there in the hallway. But when the 2 people in the world who are supposed to protect you turn out to be the danger, your mind doesn't work in straight lines anymore. It works in survival. I needed to know how deep this went before I let them know that I knew anything at all. That afternoon, while Marie took the kids to soccer practice, and Danny said he had a work call, I went into that kitchen alone, and I looked at that amber bottle properly for the first time. The label had been peeled halfway off, deliberately, like somebody had tried to make it less identifiable without fully removing it, in case they needed to prove later it was something innocent. But enough of it remained. A pharmacy name I didn't recognize, out of Pittsfield, and beneath it, in that small pharmacy print, a name I did not know, quetiapine. I am not a doctor. I didn't know what that word meant standing in that kitchen, but I had a phone, and I had 2 hands. And 20 minutes later, sitting in my truck in the driveway with the engine off, I knew enough to feel sick in a way that had nothing to do with any pill. It was an antipsychotic, used, among other things, off-label, in low doses, to sedate people, to make them compliant, to make them, as one forum thread put it, in language that turned my stomach, easier to manage, a phrase I have never since been able to unhear. I sat in that truck for 40 minutes. Tucker had his head on my knee the whole time, like he understood something was wrong, even if he couldn't have told you what. I thought about driving straight home. I thought about calling the police from that driveway. But I am, above everything else, a man who was trained his whole working life to measure twice and cut once. And I understood that if I moved too fast, I would spook them into destroying whatever evidence existed, and Marie's little scheme, whatever its full shape was, would simply mutate into something harder to prove. So I did something that, looking back, still surprises me for a man of my temperament. I decided to play along. I want to walk you through those next 9 days carefully, because they were the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than burying my wife, in a strange way, because grief is at least honest. This was a performance, and I had to be better at it than the people performing against me. I started taking my pills every morning in front of Marie, tucking them under my tongue and spitting them into a tissue the moment I was alone, flushing them, keeping the little organizer perfectly, convincingly empty on schedule. I acted a little more tired than I felt, a little more agreeable. I let Marie help me with things I didn't need help with, because a man being slowly drugged into compliance would, presumably, start needing help. And I watched. God, did I watch. I watched Danny's phone screen light up during dinner with a text from someone saved only as RK attorney that read, "Have him ready to sign by the 20th. Guardianship petition filed either way after that." I watched Marie make calls in the laundry room with the dryer running to cover her voice, not realizing the dryer had a rattling bearing that let every third word through the wall. I learned the name Randall Kessler. I learned that Randall Kessler was a Pittsfield elder law attorney who had, according to 2 separate reviews I found buried on a legal complaints forum, a history of filing guardianship petitions on behalf of concerned family members against elderly parents whose mental competency was, in each documented case, later found by an independent evaluator to have been entirely intact. One reviewer, a woman in Springfield, wrote that Kessler's petition against her own mother had been thrown out by a judge who called it transparently predatory, and that the family who hired him still hadn't faced a single consequence for trying. I learned that a guardianship, once granted, would let Danny and Marie control every dollar I had, sell my farmhouse if they wanted, make every decision about my body and my money and my freedom, and that the law, when it comes to protecting old men from their own children, moves slower than the men themselves sometimes have left to live. By the 7th day, I had photographs of the pill bottle, a recording on my phone of Marie telling Sophie to stop asking Grandpa questions that make him think too hard. We want him relaxed. And a growing certainty that I was not just dealing with my son and his wife. Somewhere behind all of it stood a lawyer who had built a business model out of exactly this kind of quiet family betrayal. I called my daughter on the 8th night. Her name is Claire. She's 36, lives 2 hours away in Hartford, and she is, and has always been, cut from entirely different cloth than her brother. Claire became a paralegal after her mother died, went back to school at 30, and finished a law degree 2 years ago, and now works for a firm that specializes, of all things, in elder law and guardianship defense, which felt, when I finally understood the shape of what was happening to me, less like a coincidence, and more like the one piece of luck I had left in the world. Dad. Her voice changed the second she heard mine, the way it does when a daughter knows her father's voice is carrying something heavy. What's wrong? I told her everything. In the truck, in a Walmart parking lot in Pittsfield, at 9 at night, because it was the only place I could think of to go where nobody would be listening through a thin wall. Claire didn't yell. She didn't panic. She went quiet, in a way that scared me more than shouting would have. And then she said, "Dad, I need you to do exactly what I tell you, and I need you to trust me completely, because if Kessler's already filed anything, we are on a clock." Over the next 4 days, my daughter built a case the way I used to build machines, piece by piece, tested and retested, nothing left to guesswork. She drove up that Saturday, under the cover of just visiting Dad while he's at Danny's, which nobody questioned because siblings visiting each other's houses is the most ordinary thing in the world. While Danny grilled burgers in the backyard and told her about a promotion he swore was coming, Claire sat with me in the guest room and photographed the pill organizer, photographed the amber bottle, which I had quietly moved and hidden in my duffel bag days earlier, and had me record, in my own words, every single detail I could remember with dates attached. She contacted an independent geriatric psychiatrist she knew personally from a case 2 years earlier, a doctor named Priya Anand, and arranged, under the pretense of helping Dad get a routine checkup while he's staying nearby, for me to be seen and formally evaluated for cognitive competency, on the record, with lab work, 4 days before Kessler's guardianship hearing date. The results came back exactly as I knew, in my bones, they would. Fully competent, no cognitive impairment. Blood work, however, showed trace levels of a sedating antipsychotic that I had no legitimate prescription for, and no medical reason to be taking. Claire filed a report with Adult Protective Services that same afternoon. 2 days after that, she filed, through her firm, an emergency motion to dismiss Kessler's guardianship petition before it ever reached a judge's desk, attaching the toxicology results, the recording, the photographs, and a sworn statement of her own. I confronted Danny and Marie on a Thursday evening, 9 days after I'd first walked into that house, believing I was going there to be loved. I asked Danny to sit down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten pot roast and told the belt buckle story, and let myself be a fool for exactly as long as I could afford to be. I set the amber bottle down between us. Danny's face went the color of drywall. "Dad, I can explain." "You can," I said. "You're going to. Every word of it. And then you're going to explain it again to a detective, because I've already called one, and he's 15 minutes out." Marie came out of the hallway at the sound of my voice, raised for the first time in 9 days. And I watched something in her calculate and recalculate in real time, the way you watch a person do math they don't want to do out loud. "You don't understand what we were up against," she said. "The company's debt, the house. We were drowning, Frank. We were actually drowning, and you have money just sitting." "That money," I said, "is mine. It was never a rescue fund for choices I didn't make. I would have helped you. All you had to do was ask me, like a son asks his father, instead of turning me into a patient you were managing into compliance, so a lawyer could steal my life out from under me on paper." Detective Marcus Whitfield arrived not 15 but 11 minutes later, and by then Claire had arrived too, standing in the doorway of that kitchen in the same quiet, immovable way she'd stood beside me my whole life, without me ever fully noticing it until now. Danny cried before the detective even got out of his car. Marie did not cry. Marie asked, with a kind of cold clarity that told me everything about who had actually built this plan, whether she could call our attorney. And it was in that single sentence, our attorney, not a family friend, not somebody they'd consulted once, that I understood exactly how long this had been planned, and exactly how little of it had ever been about desperation, and how much of it had simply been about greed wearing desperation's clothes. Detective Whitfield took statements that night. He took the bottle, the recordings, Claire's file, the toxicology report. 2 weeks later, formal charges were filed: attempted exploitation of an elder or disabled person, criminal conspiracy, and administering a substance without consent against both Danny and Marie under Massachusetts law. Randall Kessler was reported separately to the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers, and within 2 months, a second family came forward independently with an almost identical complaint against him, a woman whose own elderly mother in Springfield had nearly lost her home, the same way I nearly lost mine. His license was suspended pending investigation, and I have since learned there is now a third complaint, and a fourth. The children, Sophie and Cole, went to live temporarily with Marie's sister in Springfield, while the case moved through the courts. And I want to tell you, that has been the hardest part of all of this for me. Harder than the pills. Harder than the betrayal itself. I did not do this to punish 2 children who did nothing wrong. I did this because a man cannot let himself be dissolved out of his own life quietly, just to spare the people doing the dissolving. I still see Sophie and Cole. Claire and I make sure of that. It is not simple, and it will not be simple for a long time, maybe ever completely, but it is honest, and honest is the thing I promised myself. Sitting in that Walmart parking lot at 9 o'clock at night, I would never again go without. The case is set to go to trial this coming fall. Danny is out on bail, living with a cousin, working a job that pays a fraction of what he used to make. And from what Claire tells me, finally telling something close to the truth about how deep in debt he really was, and how much of this had been Marie's architecture from the very beginning, built with Randall Kessler's blueprints and his own signature at the bottom. I moved back into the farmhouse on Wacona Falls Road 2 days after the arrest. Claire stayed with me the first week, and on the 7th night, we sat on the back porch with Tucker between us, watching the last of the March snow melt off the tree line, and she asked me if I regretted going to Danny's in the first place. I thought about that for a long time before I answered her. No, I said. I don't regret it, because if I hadn't gone, I never would have known the truth, and I would have spent whatever years I had left believing I was loved by someone who was only ever managing me. I would rather know. Even this. Even all of it. I would rather know. Claire reached over and took my hand the way she used to when she was small, crossing a street, unsure of the traffic. You're not managed anymore, Dad, she said. You're just Dad again. I sat with that a long while after she went to bed, out there on the porch alone with the dog, and the melting snow, and the particular silence of a house that, for the first time in years, held no lies inside its walls. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that, the way Claire taught me to be honest. Because triumph isn't really the word for watching your own son taken away in handcuffs. What I felt, underneath the grief of it, solid and load-bearing, was something closer to relief, the specific relief of a man who has finally, completely, stopped being managed by people who were supposed to love him instead. If this story found you tonight, and it reminds you of somebody in your own life, a father, a mother, an uncle you haven't checked on in a while, go check on them. Ask them the real questions. Because the people who love us the most sometimes need us to notice the small things first, before the small things become everything.